Apti Alaudinov, thank you for making the time. The situation is not easy right now. In light of recent events, and I introduced you today. I didn't come alone. Pavel Ivanov came with me, and Father Nikolai is present. Today, let's say with this small creative team, we want to talk about things that are quite serious, even eternal in some ways. And at the beginning of the conversation, I want to ask you this. We visited the Akhmat Special Forces Unit, the 8th Detachment today, and wanted to talk to the guys who participated in the Flow Special Operation. But it turned out that the guys are in hospitals, injured, some seriously injured. God bless them with health, and there was no one to talk to. But this is regarding the intensity of the battles that took place for Sudzha, and it turns out that now you'll have to, well, forgive me, sort of tell us on behalf of the entire AD detachment what really happened there, because there are many rumors, many speculations. There's little reliable information. So please, briefly, how the operation was conducted, who developed it, who participated, and what the outcome was.
Well, look, we probably shouldn't talk about the AID detachment specifically. I literally recorded a video. So I'll just lay out the situation, how it all happened, how everything unfolded. So, first of all, I want to highlight the Veterans Unit. This is the unit that prepared this pipe. That is the pipe itself. They entered there over the course of almost 3 months, you could say. Intensive work was carried out there. Hatches were cut out, and as they say, entire dugouts were excavated. Under this pipe, you could say, to provide the opportunity to bring people in there. From there, the guys from this unit, it turns out, extracted the gas and made a pipe inlet there to be able to pump air in. Well, this is a very large amount of work that was done directly by the fighters from the Veterans Unit. So, moving on. Once the pipe was ready, the question arose about preparing the operation itself. So this operation was already prepared in such a way that, so fighters from 5 units entered this pipe. So they were assigned a task. And now I can lay out how on that day the events themselves unfolded when we had already decided for ourselves that the pipe was ready and we could start entering and beginning the operation itself. It turns out on the 1st, it was the 1st of March, I arrived at night to the guys from the aid unit because when the question arose about which of my units would go into the pipe to carry out specifically. Sabotage tasks I assigned the aid units because they specialize in such sabotage work behind enemy lines. I gave them the task that they must go and complete the mission in such a way that this operation would completely change the outcome of the war itself. That is, in principle, as I said, that's how it turned out. Identifying this unit as one of the units that would go directly in the front lines, directly into the pipe. I fully assigned them tasks, told them what they must do. It turns out that 5 units have already reached the pipe in stages. The first ones to reach the very front line were the guys from the 80 Special Forces Akhmat unit. Along with them, the guys also arrived there. From Company B of the 30th Regiment, these 2 units had the task to be the first to emerge from this pipe to occupy the forest plantation, the trenches that were right in front of the pipe, and 2 strong points that are also located there. On the right side of this pipe, they were to enter the settlement of Kubatkin, capture it, and secure 2 bridges that are right at the crossing, Kubatkin, Zazulevka. It turns out that credit must be given to the guys from the Veterans Unit, honor and praise for preparing the pipe itself. But honor and praise to the guys who went in, and indeed, by being the first to rush in, captured the strongholds, the settlement of Kubatkin. To the Aida squad and the guys from the 30th Regiment, he'd say, because it was done so swiftly that the enemy was caught in slippers, t-shirts and shorts, just as they were sitting in their dugouts. At the strong points, they didn't even have time to understand what happened to them. It all happened so lightning fast that they were already, whoever dared to even just raise a weapon, they were destroyed and the rest scattered from there. And when the enemy saw all of this, well, panic really spread strongly among the enemy ranks, it turns out. They were already being pursued. From the pipe, it turns out the unit of the 11th Brigade, the guys from the 11th Brigade, the fighters of the Vostok detachment and the detachment, it turns out, the veterans headed in the direction of Sudzha. Each of these detachments had its own task. Simultaneously, as these guys moved towards Sudzha, the Aida detachment went to the right, already taking control of the strongholds, Kubatkin and both bridges. In parallel with this, all our units began to advance on all fronts. How did it turn out? We still, when we acknowledge the guys who completed the task in the pipe, must simultaneously acknowledge the units that did their part of the work. We need to acknowledge the Kashatan detachment, the Akhmat Special Forces, who simultaneously with the actions taking place behind enemy lines, managed to capture the settlement of Kositsa, and from there moved into the Ivashkovsky forest. They cleared the Ivashkovsky forest and directly reached the Zazulevka-Kubatkin area. From the direction of Koronevsk, they advanced, clearing the area from top to bottom, clearing all these plantations and settlements. The guys from the 155th Brigade approached and captured Zazulevka. Simultaneously, the Kashatan detachment and the fighters of the 155th Brigade approached this junction. Zazulevka was taken. That is Kositsa, Zazulevka, Ivashkovsky Forest, and Ivashkovkin. All of this was taken by the detachment Chestnut, it turns out. Now, Cherkasy is a plague. In Cherkasskaya Poreknaya, we had an advance by the Kokol detachment, Akhmat Special Forces, and the Gortsa detachment of Akhmat Special Forces and fighters. The 3rd Regiment, which entered, cleared, it turns out, Cherkasskoye and Poreknoye, and another detachment of Gortsa, it turns out, went to the right and took the settlement of Pravda. So this small area was also cleared in this way. Next is Martinovka. It turns out in Martinovka we have the two battalions, it turns out, of the Akhmat Chechnya regiment, which entered Martinovka from two sides. It turns out, and the detachment from Petersburg, which entered from the third side simultaneously, or it turns out, they began to clear Martinovka. That is, the picture turned out such that the work of all these units was simultaneously conducted under the accompaniment of a similar artillery group of the press unit. That is, our SEG, it turns out, the Akhmat SEG, under the leadership of the press, fully supported the fighters, specifically with artillery work and, it turns out, the work of tanks. That is, the drone operators, without resting for a single second, did their job by knocking out and destroying the enemy who was already fleeing. And all these units simultaneously did such a volume of work that within 2 to 3 days, all these settlements, it turns out that they were liberated. All the forest plantations were cleared. All the forest areas were cleared. In principle, we then proceeded with a very thorough, as they say, clearing of these settlements, because there were still Ukrainians hiding in various boroughs and other places. Those who resisted were destroyed and the rest were taken prisoner. It turned out that 7 fighters from the Ukrainian formations were taken prisoner and the rest who resisted were destroyed. The picture is such that this entire section, all this work was done by the units. If you start from one edge, it turns out, Special Forces Akhmat, 30th Regiment, all units of Special Forces Akhmat, 30th Regiment, 14 to 27 Regiment. We cleared the forest area above Kositsa. Below, we had a regiment securing the territories. Additionally, from the side of the Olginsky Forest came the 155th Brigade, which did a very large amount of work. Then it turns out we surrounded it from all sides. It turns out Sudzha, and Sudzha was also cleared, as we saw, over the course of a couple of days. That is, further work on advancement is carried out daily. At the moment, it turns out, we have not liberated. There remain 3 settlements in the Kursk region. Work is also being done on them. There is daily progress, daily destruction of the enemy. It exists. The enemy is trying with all its might. It is already, already. They are being driven with bayonets He already realized at first he fled to the territory of the Sumy region. From there, other units began to be brought in, with which they are trying to hold at least these 3 settlements, which in principle is also beyond their strength.
AK Runovik, a stunning operation both in terms of military audacity, results and scale. And it's amazing that in our time, when Western intelligence is working for the enemy, it was possible to maintain all this secrecy, considering how many people were involved. It is truly amazing, it is a great success, and all of Russia thanks and congratulates you. As for the losses that we were told about, which areas turned out to be the most difficult, the most challenging, it was said that even in the pipeline, losses began during the transition.
What was the situation here? Yes. The first 2 units that emerged from the pipeline, they basically came out, you could say, without significant losses. That is, the Akhmat Special Forces and the company from the 30th Regiment came out without significant losses because no one expected them, and the fact that they immediately, without stopping, rushed into these plantations and took these strongholds played such a good role that most of them survived. When the enemy already saw what was happening, because there were drones hovering in the air, when the enemy saw this, the part of our forces that went out to head towards Sudzha was hit by cluster munitions, resulting in losses there, on our side it turns out. And also in Cherkaskoye, in our area, it turns out there were also losses because the enemy started actively shelling with artillery and cluster munitions. As a result, we also suffered losses. But I want to note that there were losses in this operation. If we look at the actual result and what has been accomplished and the number of territories and settlements liberated, we probably have to state that this was an operation with minimal losses and such a large-scale result. That is, in the history of the special military operation, probably boast about an operation. With such an outcome, probably no one else can boast of, because these were indeed mines. Minimal losses.
With such a huge result, we learned today, while visiting the units, and yes, we met Father Nikolai there, and to be honest, it was unusual. We will definitely show these shots. It was unusual to observe, as you could say, right in the field conditions. The service of sacraments and communion was held. And I think many who previously had various doubts about whether the Akhmat unit is truly not only multinational but also multi-confessional, these doubts will be dispelled. In our last meeting, you mentioned that you pay significant attention to work with both the Muslim representatives in the Akhmat unit and the Christians who serve, because you do not divide people by nationality and religious principles. I know that you and Father Nikolai are great friends, one could say.
He is my older brother. Say it, say it.
Understood. My apologies. I will correct myself. Could you please tell us how these relationships started? Perhaps Father Nikolai could also add something.
Well, I would like to say, you know what? I have no need to prove anything to anyone. I do what I must do. And I would like to note that probably in the special military operation, during the special military operation, the first priests appeared with me in Akhmat. Before they appeared with me in Akhmat, I hadn't heard of priests being in the special military operation. At the start of the special military operation, I had my deputy for the Christian line in Akhmat with the call sign Greek. Greek by nationality, Simos, with whom we initially set up this work. So in Akhmat, I had both Muslim imams and priests. That is, I always had priests. And the work of the priests and imams was always monitored by me, because I believe that a soldier who has a spiritual foundation is much stronger and more powerful than any soldier, even with larger biceps, muscles, and any equipment, military gear. Because the spiritual component is the foundation for any person who fights on the side of God, for God's interests, for God's values. That is, in this case, we definitely needed to focus on the representatives. 2 confessions. In principle, the majority of my fighters, of course, consist of representatives of these 2 confessions, that is, Islam and Christianity, Orthodoxy. Therefore, I can say today, also as a statement of fact, that in my special forces, Ahmad, there are 4 imams. That is, these are Muslim priests. But I also have, it turns out, 4 of my priests. It turns out, and Father Nikolai is with us, he is precisely the main one in these matters, because in all matters, probably specifically concerning Christianity, Orthodoxy, I mainly rely on my older brother. And to be honest, I gained a lot of benefit from him. And I am really very happy that we always have such conversations. Therefore, the work is organized in such a way that I, on the contrary, always try to invite them over. Clergymen, so that they can work with the guys, thanks to which they have this spirit. They understand that they are on a sacred war, and every day this work is carried out with them. I'm glad and happy about this. Father Nikolai, if something is not right, please add, dear.
This, dear brothers, in fact, there is almost nothing to add. Just, in life, nothing is accidental. Our meeting also happened by God's grace, by God's providence, because God read my aspiration, He read Apti Alaudino's aspiration. They practically coincide by 99%, these aspirations, because he loves God, I love God, we sincerely strive. Feeling our unworthiness, nevertheless, this does not stop us. He loves our motherland, I love our motherland. And here everything aligns, and Russia is such a country, it is a stronghold. The last stronghold of truly divine values, and thank God we understand this, and I practically don't need to suggest anything to Teoremic. It's enough that we have some tea, spend time with each other, look into each other's eyes, and strengthen ourselves spiritually. And today you saw for yourself, actually, that there are guys who need to be worked with, who need things explained to them. After all, how many decades have we had? All of this wasn't hidden, but it didn't flourish. And essentially that's probably why we ended up where we are now. And now we understand this, at least those of us present here. And we have many supporters, thank God, who understand that the spiritual component holds paramount importance over the economic weakening of the United States, the economic weakening of China. But they don't have something like this, that spiritual and moral core that we have. And that's why this core makes us stronger than all of them combined. I'm not saying they are bad or weak, no, but we are invincible because God loves us simply because we love God. That's all.
Pasha was very surprised even the first time he came to such a liturgy, right? Yes, especially, it wasn't a liturgy, it was a prayer service, but also communion under military conditions. Abderanoic, you once talked about how Operation Stream was conducted. You mentioned, as I understood, a detachment. Yes. Can I say a few words? Hatred is very widespread on the internet, Shorko. And when Father Nikolai gave a short sermon, he mentioned that we need to resist the hatred that is spreading, and that, on the internet, it is considered the worst kind of insult. But you call your brothers, your fellow combatants, quite normally. Can I say a few words about this?
Well, I want to say that this is our brother Alexei. Well, let me put it this way. He was born in Samara. His ancestors, it turns out, are from the Zhytomyr region. And basically, here he is, a true, genuine Russian Ukrainian. That's what he is. That is to say, we also laughed about this. We talked for a long time about the call sign. Why, he says, well, basically, I shouldn't hide where my roots are from, he says. Well, this is a person who is so devoted to Russia and considers himself Russian. His soul is our Russian one, which is not considered shameful for us. If you noticed, I have always said this, I have always said this, and I will repeat it now. I love Ukrainians. As a people, they cannot be a bad people. A people cannot be bad. In every nation, there is a certain category of people who are bad. And in this case, even in this case, we must tell ourselves that Ukrainians as a people are our brothers, and we cannot say that they are all bad. They have truly found themselves under the oppression of fascists, who have essentially captured them, as if in captivity. They are in slavery. And so being in this slavery, they are powerless, they cannot oppose anything to this force, to this pressure that is being exerted on them. At the same time, we have seen so-called Russians who are on the other side have created some groups, enter our territory and kill Russians. We cannot say that Russians are bad because of this. No. So we still need to determine for ourselves. The world is divided into two camps. These two camps are called the camp that is on the side of God, regardless of nationality, and the camp that is on the side of the Antichrist, Dajjal. These are the Satanists. They will call themselves by nationality as Russians, Ukrainians, Chechens, or someone else. But if they are in the camp of the Satanists, believe me, they will follow him. But not to divine values and interests. To God, that's the essence. We, I think, need to wake up and understand that there are no bad nationalities. There are people in every nationality, both bad and good. And we, if we strive towards God, must understand that a person who strives towards God cannot behave like the Satanists. Why? Then the question arises, what's the difference between you? They kill indiscriminately, you kill indiscriminately, so you will be the same. Over these 3 years, all my guys know that I always said these words, try your best to capture alive, do not kill. Why? Because in this way, we show them who we are, what the difference is between us. That we try, even under these conditions, to preserve their lives so that they can return to their families and tell them what the difference is between us and them. This is the essence and value of all this work.
I wanted to ask about your feelings regarding what you and your fighters encountered in the territory that was liberated. I mean, the civilians. Do you have, for example, a story or something special that touched you?
Well, there are many such stories, because we found the bodies of our tortured, raped people. Tortured, murdered, elderly people, women. This was in Ruskoye Porečnoye. A criminal case has already been initiated on this fact, testimonies have been given, and some of those involved have already been detained. And, of course, we were all deeply moved by a letter, this diary of a woman who was in Martinovka, it turns out. She wrote every day about what was happening. My guys, when they were checking the houses, they saw this woman already dead, and her notebook, the diary she kept. What is written in this diary, of course, indeed, plunges any sane person into utter shock and absolute horror. Why? Because supposedly our brothers, the Ukrainians, who are truly in the same village as this woman, let her die of hunger. Even though they could have easily taken her out of there, given her a chance to live, given her a piece of bread, that would have shown their human side. And here it turns out that yes, her. They didn't kill her, but she died of hunger. She writes, on the 12th day, and they ate. And she understands that she is dying of hunger. But she doesn't go anywhere, doesn't ask anyone. For a piece of bread she proudly died, alone from hunger and cold. She describes how many layers of clothing she put on. And here she dies in this proud solitude. Of course, this was horrifying. Why? Because these people allowed her to die a hungry and cold death. That's one. Secondly, still, how much resilience and spirit does this woman have that she didn't go begging to someone, but decided to die proudly at home? I think this is an example indeed of the resilience, heroism, and courage of our people. After all, the people here, I always say, the Kursk region is a place where there are people made of a special kind of metal. These are very resilient people, very heroic, patriotically minded people. And this, of course, every time you read it, every time you see these pages photographed on the internet, you come across them. And every time you get a lump in your throat. Each of us in this case should remember our mother, our grandmother, our sister, maybe those who are older. And it's impossible to imagine that we, let's say Russian soldiers, would allow ourselves, upon arriving in some territory, to let someone on that territory die of starvation. I remember for 3 years as we advanced, every settlement we took, our number one task was caravans followed us immediately, you could say, from the Akhmat Kadyrov Foundation, which immediately delivered food, water, hygiene items, as they say, to provide for the population. That is, our work was always organized this way. People, they are the main asset. The land, without the territory, it means nothing to us. Russia is the richest country in the world in terms of land. It is the richest country in the world in terms of land. The population density of Russia, on 1/6 of the planet Earth, it is negligible. And here is precisely the question of who lives in our country, what kind of souls we have, and who, turns out, is fighting against us. Satanists who absolutely do not care about these people, do not care about the peaceful people who could have simply been taken to the other side, over to the Belarusian border, yes, just sent. No, they held them as a human shield. That's what's frightening. Of course. Some people start blaming us. They acted like that, and you are coddling them. You are preserving their lives. On the other hand, again, I repeat, what difference will there be between us if we don't let them realize in their lifetime what they have done? We must give them the opportunity to realize this. Why? Because when they return home, they should tell their families what they did and how we treated them? Nobly. Even if we, within the framework of the current legislation, even if we punish them, if some criminal measures were taken against them, even in that case, we are humane towards them. We take them in, we give them the opportunity to bathe, change clothes, we feed them, give them drinks, and they sit with us in warmth. No one tortures them, no one torments or violates them. That's the difference between us. Why? Because we are on the side of God. And our divine values, then what God has given us, do not allow us to be like them.
Thank you for what you are describing. In fact, this is what it means to be liberators, and this is the image of victory. Returning to the crimes of the Kiev regime and its adherents, there is certain information at the level of rumors that somewhere chemical weapons were used. We were just discussing war crimes against the civilian population. Do you think there is no sense in involving some supporters from China, India, the Arab Emirates, so that they could document these crimes internationally and voice them at the UN platform, because we see how Russia is perceived, and the same Chinese, India, and other players could bring this to a new level?
Well, let's look at this question from a certain perspective. Over these 3 years, our adversary has used everything possible and impossible. They have used chemical weapons, all prohibited munitions, they have used all forms of torture and committed mass murders. However, we must understand for ourselves that first and foremost, we are left with ourselves. Yes, we have an ally. The same Belarus, yes, it is our ally. But at the same time, no matter what anyone says, it turns out that Russia is fighting alone against this common enemy of ours. And it is clear that no one wants to specifically stand up and declare that we will stand by Russia. No matter what happens, we will stand with them. No one wants to say this yet. Everyone is waiting until this swing tips in one direction. And it is clear that today the whole world has already realized that Russia cannot be defeated. These are issues that we will have to resolve later, once all this is over. Each of these issues will be addressed. All these criminals, they must receive according to their merits. These are questions for the future. Right now, I think that it's unlikely that anyone, China or India or other entities will, as they say, rush into an attack to punish someone. Yes, they make some statements there, but at the same time, they are, as they say, not very effective. We will do everything en bon ourselves because we are the victors, eh? And as victors, we will be able to dot all the I's later.
We can't really count on international support so far.
At the moment, we can say that we've been fighting for 3 years and have not received specific international support, but we still have it. Thank God that China understands that in principle it will be next, and because of this it still adheres to some principles. They support us mainly, let's say, in a moral format, and our other allies who support us more in a moral format, but there are no forces that have come and stood up saying, we will now stand with Russia and we will fight with you. No one is saying that. So it turns out we need to draw conclusions from this and defeat our enemy ourselves, as we have always done historically. The United West has always fought against us, and it has always lost to us, as it is now.
Yes, it will be so.
Yes, it will be so, definitely.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good luck to you and your fighters.
Thank you. Thanks to Father Nikolai.
A special thanks to Father Nikolai, undoubtedly, for guiding the Orthodox believers. Yes, thanks.